Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the intensely pressurized, high-stakes world of international cricket. We're going to look at a recent flashpoint that just perfectly captures the incredible and honestly sometimes crushing weight we place on accelerated youth athletes. It's a wild story about raw talent, massive expectations, and a teenager who was suddenly thrust onto a stage that would probably terrify most seasoned veterans.
All right, let's just jump right into the climax of the story. Picture this. We're under the rapidly fading lights of the Dambulla International Stadium. Somebody yells, "Match over, now you go home." Now that wasn't just some casual post-game remark. That was a highly targeted taunt from Sri Lanka's ace, Vishen Halambaja, and he aimed it right at Vaibhav Sooryavanshi, an Indian cricketer who is, officially, just 15 years old. The tension in that moment was absolutely palpable, capping off a match that had already been completely derailed by administrative chaos and fierce competition.
So you gotta wonder, right? How exactly does a 15-year-old phenom end up in a near brawl on the international stage? Well, that taunt triggered an immediate reaction. Sooryavanshi charged, he shoved his opponent, and suddenly what was supposed to be a developmental match was inches away from a full-scale physical brawl. It literally took the rapid intervention of senior Sri Lankan international Niranjan Dickwella, who had to step directly between the players to defuse the threat. To understand how a teenager snapped so publicly, we really need to peel back the layers of this event and look at his totally extraordinary trajectory.
To really grasp that pressure, just look at his timeline. I mean, it is practically vertical. At just 12 years old, he became the second youngest player in history to debut in the modern Ranji Trophy era. At 13, he secured an Indian Premier League contract with the Rajasthan Royals for a staggering 1.1 crore rupees. By 14, he's out there smashing a record-breaking 175 runs in an under-19 World Cup final. And at 15, he's named the most valuable player in the entire IPL. The kid has had almost zero time to just be a kid.
Think about this for a second. 237.30. That was his mind-boggling strike rate during his breakout 2026 IPL campaign. He clobbered 776 runs, hit a record 72 sixes, won the orange cap, and was named super striker of the tournament. And the prize for all that? A brand new Tata Sierra SUV. Which leads to the ultimate irony here, and this really captures his bizarre reality: he isn't legally old enough to drive it. That number represents immense commercial and athletic value for sure, but it also represents the massive, inescapable spotlight that follows his every single move.
So take all that intense spotlight and drop it straight into a highly contentious match in Dambulla. Long before the final ball was bowled, the friction was mounting. First off, India A was slapped with a highly unusual 10-run penalty just because a batter ran on the protected area of the pitch. So Sri Lanka A started their run chase with 10 runs already on the board. Fast forward to the final ball. The scores are tied, but they are playing in rapidly failing natural light, and the stadium didn't even have active floodlights. Despite Sri Lanka's very real protests regarding player safety in the dark, India A captain Tilak Varma fiercely lobbied the umpires to play a tie-breaking super over.
And crazy enough, the umpires actually relented. But the super over? It was pure chaos. Sri Lanka A batted first and scored 16 runs, heavily aided by a super controversial waist-high no ball that absolutely infuriated the Indian side. Then, it was India's turn to chase in near-dark conditions. Sri Lanka deployed 19-year-old Kugathas Mathalan. Now, this guy is a bowler with a slingy, low-arm action that is incredibly difficult to pick up even when the lighting is perfect. Mathalan executed flawlessly. He kept the young Indian prodigy off the strike early on, and when Sooryavanshi finally got his chance, Mathalan completely choked his scoring, dismissing him for just 6 runs on a perfect final ball yorker.
Now, here's the real crux of the issue. You have a player who literally just dominated the world's premier T20 franchise league, hitting world-class bowlers into the stands while 50,000 fans screamed his name. Yet you put him on this grinding developmental A tour, facing highly motivated pathway athletes on tough pitches, and his scores plummeted to 12, 44, and 21. It's a jarring reality check. It's a completely different environment that requires an entirely different psychological and technical toolkit.
And trust me, his opponents know this. As Sooryavanshi walked off that pitch, a Sri Lankan player yelled, "This is not IPL." That wasn't just standard trash talk. That was a tactical strike. Opposing teams actively weaponize his franchise fame to exploit the growing pains of a kid transitioning back to developmental cricket. They deliberately wanted to get under his skin, and, as we saw with the shove, it worked perfectly.
It's also vital to contextualize all this within the super intense regional youth rivalries of the subcontinent. Because this wasn't an isolated incident. Sooryavanshi has a well-documented history of emotional volatility in these exact matchups. Back in 2024, he humiliated the Sri Lanka U19 team by hitting 31 runs in a single over. But then, in 2025, Sri Lankan pacer Rasitnam Sara aggressively dismissed him for 9 and gave him a massive, in-your-face send-off. Later that same year, against Pakistan, after getting out, he famously gestured to his foot and told bowler Ali Raza his status was no better than my shoes. Opponents study this stuff. They target his temperament because they know he reacts.
But wait, layered on top of all this on-field pressure is a massive off-field controversy that we need to look at objectively. There is widespread skepticism out there regarding Sooryavanchi's biological age. Let's break it down. His official birth records list him as 15 years old. However, in a 2023 interview with BNN News, he himself stated he was turning 14 that year, which would actually make him 16 today. Furthermore, the highly respected cricket journalist Gideon Hai reported that during a 2025 administrative inquiry, a reliable source claimed Sooryavanshi stated he was actually 19. Now his father, Sanjeev, fiercely defends his son's integrity, insisting Vaibhav has passed every single official medical screening since he was 8 years old.
And the skepticism wasn't just coming from journalists either. Back when he was picked for the Bihar Ranji Trophy team at age 12, local accounts totally fueled the fire. A Ned bowler named Jha reported facing the young batsman and recounted a practice session where a single pole shot from this supposedly preteen kid literally tore right through the heavy protective netting. It was this sheer unusual physical dominance that originally forced the Board of Control for Cricket in India to order a special bone test to verify his eligibility in the first place. To understand how the board actually handles this, we need to talk a bit of science. Historically, the BCCI used the TW3 method. This involves scanning the wrist to estimate bone age. But here was the major flaw with that system. It automatically added a rigid mathematical +1 factor to that biological estimate to project a player's eligibility for the upcoming season. Because of this really rigid arithmetic, legitimately young players were frequently disqualified over minor decimal variations rather than their actual physical growth.
Well, the intense scrutiny surrounding a multi-million-dollar teenager actually forced a systemic change. In June 2025, the BCCI completely restructured its rules. They threw out that rigid mathematical +1 projection. Now, if a player crosses a threshold based on estimates, they get an actual physical, biological retest the following season. It's a massive shift from rigid math to modern science, designed to catch real age fraud without unnecessarily punishing kids who just happen to hit an early growth spurt.
Bringing it back to the human element of this story, let's look at the mentorship Sooryavanshi has received. Just weeks before this whole Dambulla incident blew up, former Indian captain Virat Kohli actually put his arm around the youngster and gave him this advice. Do not pay attention to who is saying what or how they are saying it. And you know, it's incredibly sound advice from a legend who definitely struggled with his own temper early on. But there's a massive gulf between hearing that advice in a quiet, safe dressing room and actually applying it when you are an exhausted teenager standing out in the dark, being actively provoked by older players, all while carrying the stress of an incoming senior international debut. Which leaves us with this massive, unavoidable question. Can a 15-year-old really carry the weight of a billion expectations without breaking? Vaibhav Sooryavanshi is actively preparing to surpass the legendary Sachin Tendulkar as the youngest player to ever represent the senior Indian men's team. His physical talent, absolutely undeniable. But what you should really take away from this explainer is that building a world-class athlete isn't just about honing their swing. It is absolutely crucial to protect their mind. So we have to ask ourselves, are we nurturing a once-in-a-generation prodigy, or are we just pushing a kid way too far, way too fast?